as we close in on a brand new format in Master Duel coming August 31st, not only with the ban list that will nerf combo decks and a lot of strong archetypes like Tearlaments, grass decks, and etc., but we are also expecting the Purrely archetype to hit the game for the selection pack coming in September. Now, before the event goes away, I do want to review Labrynth and talk about its place in the meta, because I did mention that I think this deck would be S tier. However, I think with Purrely coming to the game, there will be a heavy reliance on the coin flip. In this match here, which if you checked my match history, you can see this was the only match we lost in our last 7 or 8 or whatever. Opening hand, only one hand trap, but as you guys know, this card is going to 1, and you won't have to deal with this. So as soon as I see the opponent mills the nuts, right, they've got the Malicious, they've got the Phantom Knight cards, they've got tier limit cards, I just resign turn 1. So again, from the video that I just made the other day, I guess, where I talked about is this game beyond saving, I think Konami is moving in the right direction with the ban list. Now we just need to move them in the right direction in terms of card design. But let's see how the rest of these matches play out. Let me know in the comment section below, if you see your opponent resolve grass against you, are you essentially just scooping it up once you see them have 5, 6, 7 playable cards out of those 20 that they milled? It can be quite ridiculous. In this match, after losing to grass, I was not necessarily heated, but I was like, yeah, that's kind of BS. So I know I don't normally do this, but I set 5, and you're probably thinking Quantum, you're opening yourself up to Lightning Storm, Feather Duster, evenly matched. You are 100% right, but I'm like, at this point, why not, right? Let's see what happens. The opponent summons Orochi and just resigns, so that was very interesting. I guess people are feeling it on both ends. They just aren't really willing to play matches. So I think, you know, right now the format and the way people are playing says a lot about the current state of the game. And so the point of me making this video is not to show you more light versus dark content, but essentially it's to further the discussion around the ban list, and if the game is currently in a state that is very hard for people to want to play. As you saw, I resigned on turn 0, my opponent just resigned on turn 0, and these were back-to-back Master 1 matches. So, you know, at this level, we know, like, there's no real point in playing out a match because it's not going to be interactive. It's going to be very oppressive. If I don't have the perfect hand, and even if I do have the perfect hand, as you saw in my previous video, it still might not be enough. Now, this match is an excellent example of how I think the game should be. I'm playing an interactive deck. Yes, Labrynth, I understand, can be a little annoying with trap cards, but it's not necessarily unbeatable. Unless you draw the absolute nuts, in which case sometimes it can be while going first. So a lot of things have to line up for Labrynth for it to really be like a blowout deck. But the reason that this deck I think is top tier is because it's a control deck, and it's one of the strongest control decks in the meta. And control decks in general can do a lot to break boards, and especially if they go first, set up the control game, in which case it makes it hard for your opponent to play. It doesn't make it impossible for you to play, it doesn't just negate everything you try to do, but you have to be smart with your interruptions with a control deck, and if you're not smart and you blow up the thing at the wrong time, or you activate your trap at the wrong time, your opponent can likely play through with extenders and just beat you out. You can see here I made a huge misplay, not realizing that this card protects the equipped monster from like destruction, so I completely ended up playing myself and misplaying hard with the destruction effect of, I think it was Lovely there, and the card didn't get destroyed, and now they activate Honest and beat over my Lovely. Game's not over though, and again, this is how I think the game should be. Despite you making one simple misplay, it doesn't necessarily mean the game should be completely over. Sometimes it is, and that's fair. You know, you made a mistake, you can't get mad at anybody but yourself. But thankfully, you know, you build your deck to be interactive, to counter threats, and that's exactly what we see here. We kaiju off the opponent's card. I think there was a reason I specifically did this, like it prevented the trigger of some card or whatever. But, you know, not really understanding, or sorry, not understanding, but not really playing against Union or ABC decks all that much. I had to really read these cards to figure out what they do. So I kind of like anticipated, yeah, okay, they're going to bring back cards, they're going to be able to search cards, whatever. And through this, we're going to be able to try to counter what the opponent does. So you can see I'm very careful with the way I'm activating things. Now that I have Lovely on board, I'm going to use Ice Dragon Prison to get rid of some of the ABC cards to trigger the Lovely and trigger the Labrynth to bring back a Fiend, and also trigger the other effects that I can in the graveyard, like Chandelier. So we get double Lovely on field, and we pop a card in the opponent's hand. Unfortunately, we pop the Draco back. But this match isn't over. You can see that, you know, the opponent had the advantage for a little bit, then the advantage swung back to me. We're each making plays to out each other's boards, so to speak. Now, albeit it's a little bit harder for the opponent, obviously, because I'm playing a better deck than they are. So props to them for trying ABC. And thankfully, you know, we had the cards to stop them. But ABC isn't really built to counteract traps. I mean, if they go first and they set up the monster, I think it's a quick effect pop a card like the Fusion ABC card. So it can be very strong, but you can see here we have enough traps to slow down the opponent, put them on nothing, and now we have our full engine rolling, in which case the game is pretty much decided at this point and we are going to win. But this was a great game. I think this was like 4 or 5 turns. Even the game I lost that I posted in my last video, the second game, not the first one, the Drytron game, that was kind of toxic in my opinion, but the second game where I lost and the opponent just had a really good Labrynth hand and probably outplayed me too, that was a really good game, and that was interactive. It was back and forth for a little bit, and then there was a certain point where I was like, yeah, the game is pretty much won by the opponent. I can't really come back, and I resigned, but I could have stayed and played it out. Thankfully, this opponent stayed. I was just getting some challenges in, so I'm not trying to BM or anything. I usually try to end the match as quickly as possible if I know I'm winning, but yeah, Labrynth doesn't really link summon or Xyz summon, so it's hard to get those challenges done when you're playing this deck. Nonetheless, though, we put up a OTK board here, and we're able to take the match after some good back and forth in that one. Another reason that I wanted to point out the significance of Purrely coming to the game is because it will be a pretty big meta shift for the game as well. Not only is Purrely a very good archetype when it has all of its support, it can be very oppressive as well, just bouncing your cards back, basically preventing you from playing, and it's, you know, the effect monster is essentially unoutable unless you have like a Kaiju or Xyz Encore or something weird like that, but with no side deck, you're not really main decking Xyz Encore or Herald of the Abyss, right? So it is what it is, but you will see a shift in terms of hand traps being used. Ash Blossom will continue to be used because of Maxi and whatnot, but you may also see an increase in Droll and Lockbird, which, funny enough, also counters Maxi, turning it into an Upstart Goblin, but you go -1 for it because you have to obviously use your Droll. But it impacts you if you're a Floowandereeze player, and most of you who watch my channel I imagine are, because Droll and Lockbird really beats Floowandereeze. You can no longer add cards from your deck to your hand, and as a result you can no longer continue to resolve bird effects. So keep in mind that if Purrely comes to the game and you see an increase in Droll and Lockbird use, you're going to want to probably switch off of Floowandereeze. Now, if you're switching off of Floowandereeze, does that mean that you should shift to Labrynth? Is that why I'm posting so much Labrynth gameplay, or is it just because of the Dark and Light event? Like, what should you do as a Floowandereeze player if Droll and Lockbird does become kind of a staple in most decks, like Maxi and Ash Blossom are? Well, Floowandereeze is also kind of stopped by Ash, and we're still able to play through that, but trying to play through an Ash and or Droll and Lockbird just increases the frequency of you getting hand trapped and shutting you down completely. And it can be really, really tough. So Konami, again, if we could get a second map back and a second Empen, that would be great, but probably not going to happen because Konami doesn't really listen to us, do they? Regardless, though, yes, you can switch to another top tier control deck, in which case Labrynth would be that. And will Labrynth remain top tier after the Purrely archetype comes to the game? It's hard to say. I would say maybe it's bumped down a bit to A tier, just because going second, Labrynth can't really do much to beat Purrely. Like, when they set up the Purrely Noir, you're not going to Stovey Torby or Chandelier during the end phase to set a card, because they'll just spin it back, which means you go -2 to set a card that gets spun back anyways, right? So it can be pretty hard. However, going first with Labrynth should most of the time be a pretty easy win no matter what deck you go up against. Even if you play against something like Floowandereeze that can play main deck evenly matched, and you get even lead, you've seen multiple ways that I've played around evenly in the past, right, in my past matches. So the deck has the versatility because it doesn't put up the biggest combo board, the biggest oppressive board, a ton of negates where you just lose to Dark Ruler. So it has its pros and its cons. You do obviously suffer through negates, just like any other deck probably would, because you don't really play all that much from the graveyard. You do rely on your traps resolving, and of course you could technically lose very, very hard to Feather Duster, Lightning Storm, and evenly match. So being conscious of those facts means that the way that you approach playing Labrynth and building Labrynth is meaningful. You've seen many times that I put up smaller boards because I anticipate evenly. You've seen me get even lead and lose like almost nothing because of the way that I'm able to play around it. Speaking of which, evenly puts in work here against the opponent. Now, you don't main deck evenly, I don't think, normally in the rank ladder, but in this event I am, obviously. So if you're used to playing Floowandereeze in that control style of gameplay, I think Labrynth will be a very good option. Purrely is also kind of like a control deck, but it's also kind of like a combo deck. It's like a spell combo deck. It's really, really weird. I haven't actually played it really that much, but it is a very powerful deck. However, you do just get like blown out by certain cards completely. And if you do get hand trapped by like a Droll, it is pretty hard to play through that, but you can. Regardless though, it will be a very top tier deck, especially if you're not ready for it. And certain decks will just not have an out to the Noir, and you'll start seeing a lot of people just scooping once they see Noir hit the board, or they can anticipate Noir hitting the board and they have nothing to out it with, right? They're just going to scoop up their cards turn 0, just like what you saw happen against that player who resolved Grass against me, or how most people end up, I guess, responding to Drytron as well in this event. They just scoop because they're like, oh, I don't have anything to stop your Drytron combos, and you're going to set up 5 Omni Negates, so I am just going to scoop right now. So, you know, I'm a little worried about the game state just because of that with Purrely coming. They did nerf different cards in the TCG and OCG to balance Purrely out. I think it was Sleepy and Delicious Memories. But I think maybe, especially in a best of 1 format, you need to limit more when Purrely is released. And somebody made a comment that I agree with on my last video where they're like, you know, the fact that Konami has to semi-limit or limit cards on release just tells you how powerful and broken these cards are. And I think you're right. I think one of the ways you can solve this game is make everything very hard archetype specific. So like Baron de Fleur should never have been made a generic card that can be made with anything. Every powerful, like really strong card should be archetype specific. I remember seeing, I think it was like Farfa's video or something where he was like, or Farfa's comment on a video where he said Appaloosa is like a weather painter. And it's like, you know what, she probably should have been, even though it's not, maybe she's not directly related to that archetype, but she shouldn't have been made generic just because anybody that can make her makes her extremely broken. So I think Konami could have probably got more longevity out of this game by introducing or making everything archetype specific, as well as improving the potential for top tier status of older decks by releasing that archetype specific support. Instead of saying, oh, you know, if you're playing a synchro based strategy like Synchrons, which are usually not too strong or they have very predictable choke points, you could have done something like make Baron de Fleur a Synchron specific card, but obviously this set's not going to sell that's in, right? And I know that was the only money card in, I think it was Synchro Storm or whatever, and that's what helped sell the set. So it's a bit of a weird state where like it's money versus game balance, but yeah, it just shows you that yeah, the card design is probably more geared towards what can sell the set rather than let's balance the game or prop up older archetypes that people have invested in and want to play. So yeah, this is kind of an extension video off of my last one, but hopefully you enjoyed the gameplay at least for what it was. I think these were, yeah, pretty much master players, yeah, for the most part. So I don't know if it was the highest level gameplay, but it was good enough, let's say. But that's going to wrap it up for this video, guys. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Thank you again for watching. Quantum is out.